Hey guys, welcome back to Torchlight Infinite. I'm Andre, your community manager. So as you guys might have noticed, we posted the Crow's Corner Q&A a while back, and we actually took some time to get to it because we received a ton of questions. I'm talking near 1,000, so of course we had to go through a selection process. A lot of those questions also led to a lot of internal discussion, which actually impacted some of the development for the upcoming season, and that's why we kind of took longer to get to it. But yeah, today we selected some of the hardest questions, our top 25 favorite questions, and we're gonna be going over them as deeply and honestly as possible. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Question number 1. Are you happy with the state of deep space? So we're not going to beat around the bush here, and to be perfectly honest, no, it's not in an ideal spot for us. So the thing with deep space is that it was always designed to be, high investment, high return kind of thing. So, when you're playing deep space, you're expected to fully juice out the maps. You're expected to have a very high investment cost going into each map, just to, even have a shot at making a profit. But what happened this season for a lot of players was that even if they could run deep space, if they were not deep enough into the season, it was actually more profitable just for them to be running profound. I mean, that's personally where I was for a long time as well. So to get back to it, no, deep space is not where we would like for it to be, and most likely this upcoming season it's gonna have some adjustments in order to align its profitability more with our expectations. Of course, deep space is always gonna be a high investment game mode. It's always gonna be expensive to run. It's always gonna be hard to run. It's always going to be more expensive and harder than profound by design, but hopefully we want the returns, the profits, to be more in line with the actual effort that you are putting into deep space. Whether that be in regards to the amount of damage that is expected from your build, whether that is in regards to the amount of FE that you're supposed to invest into each map. We want everything to be more balanced and for deep space to be more profitable, more enjoyable. Okay, next question. Is the dev team happy with Dream after the changes? As someone who ran Dream a significant amount last season and this season, the nerfs feel a bit too much. Red and rainbow bubbles of all types don't feel particularly rewarding in Timemark 8 and profound from my experience. So obviously Dream was nerfed quite a bit from the last season, but we have discussed this internally, and what the team found is that there is still a significant incentive for players to interact with Dream and to play the mechanic, but also at the same time, of course, there is a clear and marked, decrease in the overall rewards, in the overall experience compared to previous seasons. So the situation with Dream is not that clear-cut right now. It's not something that we can directly say, oh, we're gonna buff it, but it's not out of the cards as of now. So basically we're gonna be looking at it a little bit longer, analyze the data a little bit more, and then see if it needs to be tuned or not for the upcoming season. Next up, a question about the auction house or the trade house. Currently, with the 24-hour auction house timeout, we run into a situation where a multitude of items are available on the weekend when more players are on. However, come midday Monday, many things like 2 mod slates become much more difficult to find. Could we potentially make it so 24 hours after an item is listed or refreshed, it shows up on the front of searches, but extend the timeout before it's fully cancelled to 7 days? This is a very interesting point, and it's something that is very worth discussing and was brought up with the team, and it is something that the team is currently investigating. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, playing with the auction house timeout is gonna have a very significant impact on many aspects of the game, whether that be in regards to the auction house itself, the in-game economy, how players interact with the game. So it's going to be something that the team has to approach very carefully. It's going to be something that requires some proper research before it gets touched on, but it's not currently out of the cards to extend the validity period for items on the auction house. Whether that's going to be 7 days or less, we're still not sure, but yeah, extending the validity period is something worth discussing. Next up, a question regarding drops and the pace of progression. Is this the intended pace of progression moving forward? There is a lack of loot drops that isn't linear with the progression I would hope to have. It's starting to feel like more of a chore farming for higher priced items, 6 to 10k FE per item upgrade, when there is a lack of income coming from mechanics in Profound. Mind you, I do have a majority of the pets leveled. Level 6 Shepherd, level 4 Kong, level 3 Chalk, so on and so forth. So to address this very directly, the overall pace of Torchlight and the overall dropping experience, the overall pace at which players are expected to progress throughout the game from mid-game into end-game into, you know, basically graduating, finishing the game, finishing the seasonal content, that is not going to be changed. So we find that the current pace of progression fits our design philosophy for Torchlight Infinite, and we are satisfied with the current pace, and therefore we will not be making significant adjustments whether to the overall pace of the game or to the overall looting experience. Now, what we might do is that we might analyze mechanics individually, and for example, if we find that within a given season a certain mechanic was underwhelming, it was not very useful for, you know, getting some high value drops, its average profitability was below expectations, then we're gonna make individual separate adjustments to that individual mechanic in order to bring it up with everything else. But we're basically not going to be making large scale adjustments to the pace of progression of the overall game. Okay, next up, having completed many maps over the last 2 seasons, my friends and I came to the unambiguous conclusion that the rarity of items affects priceless gear. The more rarity, the less priceless gear. Can you confirm that this is indeed the case? So this is something that we actually saw a lot in comment sections this season, or, you know, on Discord, everywhere, to the point where I actually asked the development team, you know, before we actually even started preparing this Q&A. And the response that I got from the development team is that, no, this is in fact not the case. So basically, rarity should only be influencing legendary drops. Next up, we have a very interesting question. Hello! The question that worries me. Will the company close down in the near future? Is it possible to be calm about the project? Is it very worrying because it is donated every season and I would not like to lose everything? No, I completely understand where you're coming from, because, you know, we hear about titles closing left and right. I'm gonna be as honest as possible here. Torchlight is doing pretty well. So the last few seasons have done pretty decently, and we have plans to keep developing Torchlight Infinite for a long time. We're actually gonna even be expanding the efforts that are put into Torchlight's development. So yeah, things are looking good for Torchlight. Nothing to worry about on that end. That's as much as I can disclose without going into, you know, game data. But yeah, things are good. No worries. Next up, every season so far have not introduced new maps to run, and some maps are just plain bad, with dead ends, so on and so forth. Do you plan to add maps or refine the current ones? The roster needs some new, fresh maps to run. So basically, we are working to approach this issue from two perspectives. One perspective is that we are planning to introduce a series of new maps and replace a segment of the current ones. And another way that we are going to approach it is that we are also working on a procedural map generation system. Now, both of these are more long-term endeavors, because, you know, maps are the core to Torchlight Infinite, so it's not something that we are comfortable introducing or changing very lightly. So at this point, I still cannot confirm if they're going to be making it onto the next season or if it's going to have to come after that. But yeah, it's something that we're planning on doing. On one hand, more new fixed maps to replace some of the current NetherRealm maps, because, you know, we're aware that some of the maps are not an ideal experience. Starfall Galleria, I'm not a fan either, personally. And also procedural generation, but, you know, of course, as we have seen in other titles, procedural generation also comes with its own set of issues. We need to make sure it's implemented in a way that is fair to all players, in a way that it's safe. It's not going to introduce, you know, stuff that will basically break game progression or, you know, create severe unfairness among players. So that's also something that's going to have to be introduced very carefully. So yeah, to go back to your question, yes, that is something we are planning to do, adding new maps. But it's a more delicate issue, and it's something that we need to test very carefully. It's something that's going to take a lot of QA resources, and we need to be very careful about before it goes live. Next up, TLI currently has an extremely pricey defense, and it's getting worse by the season. What is the reason behind this? So the reason behind this is very simple. In some of the earlier seasons, we found that the game design and the way that many builds were developing was that the game just basically turned into a contest of who has the highest DPS. And, you know, while boom, boom, zoom, zoom across the maps can be very fun, and of course it is, it kind of makes the game overly simplified. It takes away from the complexity of many of the mechanics which were originally designed to be implemented onto the game. And we do hope that, you know, when players are fleshing out their builds, when they're planning long-term development for a character, that defense and survivability has to be something that needs to be taken into account. Of course, Torchlight has also always been designed to be a very fast, zoomy experience. We're not trying to stop that, but we do hope that the game can still maintain a certain degree of depth while maintaining that zoomy mapping experience. In regards to how pricey it is, that's honestly something that's been difficult to aim for, very specifically when the team is designing the difficulty curve for each season. And it's something that we're still analyzing. So in regards to defense, we hope for it to remain a key part of Torchlight. We hope that it stays as something that players need to take into account. But regarding how expensive it is to craft, to develop, that might be something that we're going to be approaching and hopefully make it less of a pain to, you know, ensure that you don't die in half a second, you know, as soon as you get onto first time in Profile, first time in Deep Space, whatever. Next up, a question regarding Timemark 8. T8 is a real problem right now. Most of my friends are entirely stuck in T8, including myself, and we cannot progress. We are farming for 8 hours straight to get at max 500 FE. Any plans to buff the progression on that side? So we've been going over the data for Timemark 8 this season, and what we found is actually a more complex issue. So basically the issue with T8 is not that the profit itself is intrinsically low, but that how familiar players are with the game's mechanics has too large of a polarizing effect on Timemark 8's profitability. So basically what we see is that players who are very familiar with the game's mapping system, they know how to juice out the appropriate mechanics, they know how to interact with the most profitable mechanic at any given point into the season. They actually get very decent profits out of Timemark 8. And then, of course, on the other hand, you see players who they're not so experienced with many of Torchlight's seasonal mechanics. They're not sure what they should be running, and that, of course, is going to lead to a very underwhelming mapping experience. And that polarization in Timemark 8 is actually very extreme, more so than in other Timemarks. Of course, many factors go on to that because, you know, for example, if you get to Deep Space, a lot of the players that are not so familiar with the game have also naturally been filtered out. So, you know, you won't be seeing as much of that effect. But Timemark 8 is, you know, that kind of awkward spot where basically any player can get to it. But then what players actually get out of it is going to be very segmented. Now, how are we actually planning to address this issue? So we're planning to address this twofold. So basically one way is that we want to make Torchlight Infinite more understandable. So we're working on a way to make all the in-game mechanics more clear, concise, understandable. You know, basically trying to develop more of a useful in-game wiki kind of system so that players can understand what each mechanic is aiming for, how you should interact with it, and so on and so forth. It's not like we're trying to hold players' hands, but at the same time, we do understand that, you know, Torchlight has been under development for such a long time. Now it has so many ongoing mechanics that, you know, players who haven't been here from day one, who are not familiar with each mechanic season after season, might have a difficult time understanding what's going on, and that's something that we hope to address. On the other hand is that we might just make, you know, raw drops in T8 more profitable, so that, you know, even if you're not absolutely sure how to juice out maps, if you're not sure, you know, how your NetherRealm Atlas should look like, which mechanics you should be using, it's okay. Timemark 8 drops are going to be a little bit better, and you shouldn't be doing so poorly, even if you're just, you know, bumbling about. Next up, can we expect to see the automatic crafting system expanded upon for auto crafting systems such as hero memory crafting and dream talking? Not in our current plans. Could you add fates that provide XP bonus, XP balance, XP protection? Not sure, but we actually have an ongoing Kismet submission contest right now. I'm gonna leave the link down in the comment section or in the video description. And so if you're interested, basically you can submit your Kismets to that contest. And it's our second contest of the type. We had one for legendary weapons before. And yeah, basically you can take a look at the rules and the rewards, but basically if you get chosen, you can win some very decent rewards, like something up to 25k primos. So yeah, definitely worth checking out. Next up, when we always see a season that has a lot of in-map monsters akin to Breach or Legion from PoE. Lately, it seems like every season takes you out of the map to do something else. A purely in-map seasonal mechanic that spawns a lot of monsters would be a nice change. First, just to approach the whole in-map, outside, you know, seasonal mechanic issue. The way that we are currently designing Torchlight Infinite is that we hope for a kind of 50-50 split for the way that mechanics are designed. So we hope that around 50% of the mechanics take place within maps, and the other 50% are separate mechanics. That's not to mean that each season is necessarily gonna be in out, that kind of rotation, but that is the split that we are hoping that we can target. Now, what I can tell you at this point without leaking much more is that the upcoming seasonal mechanic is actually gonna be an in-map mechanic, so enjoy and stay tuned for more, because we're gonna start preparing for the upcoming season preview as soon as possible. So stay tuned for more details. Is it possible that the guy who added portals to maps for easy navigation could take a look at Galleria? This map makes me cry when I run it. Bro! Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Starfall Galleria either. I made my opinions. Oh god. Yeah, I've made my opinions clear with the team. They also know that a lot of players are not satisfied with the map. I'm not sure what's gonna happen to that map specifically, but as I mentioned earlier in the video, we do have plans to replace certain in-game maps, and that's part of a long-term roadmap that we're working on. And at this point, I cannot guarantee which map is going to be taken out and which one is going to stay. But I can give you guys my honest personal opinion, which is that I would not mind if I never had to run Starfall Gallery over again. But yeah, the team is aware of it, and we're working on new maps. That's all I can say right now. Next up, hi, will it be possible to add an option directly in the map, or for example in the Void Sea invitation, so that it can be repeated when I have enough invitations? I think it's a good quality of life that a lot of people will appreciate. Yeah, I agree. It's something that has been brought up with the team. I actually brought it up earlier this season because I was running bossing strategies quite a lot earlier into the season, and I did not enjoy running from the Netherrealm portal back to the NPC every single time. So yeah, maybe. It's a good point, I agree. As an aside, the only reason that some of these things are not usually implemented directly without further testing is that sometimes increasing the accessibility to a certain game mode too much will actually affect the profitability. So, for example, in the case of bossing in the Void Sea, let's say that you can run a boss per second, then I mean, very likely the profitability would overcome every single other game mechanic. I'm not saying this is the reason why there's not a portal, but I'm trying to explain that this is a reason why sometimes things that might seem very basic quality of life are actually things that the development team needs to be very careful about implementing, because they might inadvertently seriously affect game balance. Next up, it's way too confusing for a new player like me. I try to do cube farming in TA and the proc chance of the mechanics is still low every time I do mapping. Put more effort for dropping instructions of every year's items. Yeah, as we mentioned earlier in the video, it's something that we're working on. We're working on a sort of in-game wiki that will be more useful in regards as to explaining players what each mechanic is for, how you should interact with each mechanic, what you should expect out of it. And yeah, for example, in the case of something like Cube, you know, it can be very profitable. It was a very good strategy this season. I'm not sure if it still is right now, but at least early in the season it was quite profitable. And I know a lot of my friends were running Cube all the way up until Deep Space. The thing with mapping strategies in Torchlight is that they involve a lot of things in order to be profitable. So of course you need to be looking at your atlas, you need to be looking at your compasses, of course you need to be looking at your paths if you have them. So that's a lot of things to juggle, and if a certain piece of the puzzle is missing, then that's gonna affect the whole thing, and then you might just be better off running something else entirely. So yeah, to get back to your question, we are going to be putting more effort into making everything clear, whether that is in regards to how game mechanics work or just drop instructions for items in general. Next up, would it be possible to allow filtering of loot strategies using all 3 existing filter types at once? Currently, I could not filter on Profound Aid and show specific seasonal mechanics such as Dream in one filter. Yeah, perfectly good idea. It's been passed on to the team and hopefully it can be implemented as soon as possible. I'm personally someone that relies a lot on the quick looting feature, so I would personally like to see something like this as well. I like copying other people's homework. Trade House price check is outdated, seriously. It shows price for items as 10 FE, but there's 50 items for 10 FE which were sold long ago and the real price is about 15 FE. Yeah, this is something that I've also experienced this season. You know, it's basically a delay caused by the Trade House API, whatever you want to call it, and that's basically inherent due to the way that it has been designed and it's operated and the way in which it pulls out and crawls the data from the auction house. Basically what the team is going to be working on is that they're going to try to optimize that system in order to make it less laggy and try to reduce that delay between the displayed prices and the actual current time market prices. Of course, there's always going to be a certain amount of delay. With the way that the system is currently implemented, it is not feasible for, you know, for it to be updated every second, every half second, because the server load for that would be immense. We are talking about an insane, extremely large amount of data to be extracted every second. But yeah, we're gonna try to reduce that delay as much as possible and keep it in a safe window of time, which allows players to, you know, have a more clear perspective of the market, of current market prices, but also without negatively impacting the servers. Next up, a question regarding preseason, because of course that's something we haven't seen in a long time. When are we going to have preseason? If not going to launch preseason anymore, what is going to happen to our preseason packs? I have them at rank 6 and they absolutely do nothing now at all for the past year. Change them to drop insignia if not going to do anything else about it, so I can up other drop packs that I have. Very good question, very good point. The preseason has been a point of discussion and contention internally for a while, and it's something that the team is going to have to come to a clear decision upon as soon as possible. And when it does, we're gonna have a public statement regarding the future of preseasons and everything else surrounding that. So whether we're gonna have them again, and if not, what's gonna happen to everything surrounding preseasons. Not something I can give a clear answer on right now, but we agree it's something that needs to be decided upon as soon as possible. Next up, are there any plans to improve the update process on the mobile client? Specifically on my iPhone, I have to download, verify the entire client whenever it's updated, which takes a lot of time. So basically we only do full client updates once a season, so you know, roughly once every 3 months, and for the rest of the patches, hot fixes, whatever, you know, we just do normal patches. Usually they're quite small. Regarding the full client updates, that's something that we cannot get around for now, because each season involves such a large development change, such a large change to the underlying basic game code, that we cannot avoid doing a full client update basically. So yeah, are there any plans to improve the update process on the mobile client? You mean if we can avoid doing a full client update altogether? That is very, very, very unlikely that we can ever achieve that. We're most likely gonna have to stick to doing a full client update every 3 months. Next up, every season you nerf loot for the average player. I invested everything into Dream Pet just for it to get gutted. What is the point of giving us free pets if you will just nerf them to get people to buy the new season pets? Also, what kind of player can afford the Predicted Justice blending recipe which costs 90k FE? It seems like you want players to spend 1 year playing a season that lasts 4 months. You say you try to combat RMT, then why do you have items and mechanics that are designed where only RMTers can... Hold on, let me move myself. Oh, I moved the screen, sorry. OBS, God. Oh, I moved the screen again, God. When only RMTers can participate. Now let me come back here. I am back. Okay, so this is quite the long question. I'm gonna have to break it down into several parts. First up, every season you nerf loot for the average player. As we mentioned early in the video, we don't have any plans to make any adjustments to overall loot or the pace of progression for TLI. So we are not aiming to nerf any specific game mechanic unless it is found that it is far exceeding every other game mechanic and you know it's kind of messing with game balance. But otherwise, no, we don't plan to nerf loot. And on the other hand, our goal is actually to buff underperforming mechanics to bring them up to par with everything else. Of course, how the market actually behaves throughout a season is not something entirely within our control, and sometimes how the market behaves goes outside our expectations, and it's not something that we can always accurately predict before each season, and if so, we can also only adjust it during the following season. Also, what kind of players can afford the Predicted Justice blending recipe which costs 90k FE? To be perfectly honest, the high cost was within our expectations. We were hoping for it to be very expensive, but we also estimate that it is something that can be achieved for players who are operating at very high efficiency since day one. So, you know, basically players who have very highly optimized mapping strategies, who are very clearly min-maxed since day one, who know how to operate within the game, who know how to juice everything they can out of Torchlight. And of course, there is a significant amount of luck involved. There is a significant amount of RNG involved with you making big FE throughout a season that is unavoidable. But yeah, we do not think that there are certain items within the game that basically require RMT. Next up, would it be possible to create mechanics that modify monsters and their numbers pack size more dramatically? Certain mechanics certainly do add their own static amount of monsters, but maps can feel somewhat similar and empty while you are progressing throughout the difficulties. Increasing mob count, or at least giving the tools to make this happen, is something that I think would be really fun. So before we introduce any further modifiers, you know, stuff that players could directly interact with in order to modify mobs, we're working on improving the core game mapping experience for TLI. So in this upcoming season, we're going to be making some adjustments to mob density, basically how it scales out throughout the seasons, how it varies from map to map. And hopefully we're gonna make the gameplay feel more dynamic as players develop throughout the season, as they get to higher time marks and less like, you know, just running the same map over and over again, but with higher DPS. To get back to your question, yes, introducing more modifiers is something that we are open to, but we think that the underlying mob design mob placement and so on and so forth needs to be optimized before we can effectively introduce more modifiers which are then directly available for players. Next up, right now we have to make a choice. If we engage with this leak's content, that means any out-of-map content really can't be engaged with. Can we please get gold drops in Mistville and Canvas, please? I mean, I think the underlying logic would be that, not just Mistville and Canvas, but any other non-Netherrealm mechanic. But this has been discussed with the team, and right now it is not within our plans. Gold is still gonna be dropping only from the Netherrealm, and the reason for that is very simple, is that the team hopes that players also have to interact with the Netherrealm and not just basically spam specific seasonal mechanics or whatever. So yeah, not in our current plans. Gold is likely to remain a Netherrealm only drop. Next up, another question about difficulty and the pacing of the game. Ever since Season 5, and I'm assuming here he's referring to SS5 or Clockwork Ballet, the devs have been making the game harder and progression slower every new season. Has this had a positive impact on the company's bottom line? So Clockwork Ballet was actually an exception in the whole TLI history. It was the fastest and most zoomy baboomby season that we had, even by TLI standards. It was extremely fast. And the season that came after that, the Frozen Canvas, was where we had to make a very large revision to a lot of game mechanics, how the game progressed, and so on and so forth. And it was a very major overhaul of a lot of core game mechanics that hopefully we don't have to enact again. Now, ever since the Frozen Canvas, we have basically maintained a steady pace for the game. We have maintained the same relative difficulty. And as we've mentioned before, this design currently fits what we originally intended TLI to be like. Of course, it is still easier and more approachable than some other ARPGs in the market, but we also don't want it to be as easy and basic as I'm not gonna drop any names, but I'm sure you can guess. We like to position ourselves between two major titles in regards to our pace of progression and our difficulty. So basically, we are satisfied with how the difficulty and pace of progression is looking right now. But of course, that is not to exclude that, if in upcoming seasons we find that players are finding the game exceedingly slow or difficult, then we might tone things down a little bit. But yes, for the foreseeable future, we are gonna, of course, always gonna work on improving TLI, making a lot of features more enjoyable from season to season, but the overall pace and difficulty are going to remain the same. Next question, Steam Deck and better controller support. Do you think we may ever see a Switch 1 or 2 version? So first of all, TLI is working on a further UI and graphics overhaul, as the game has started to perform better and better amongst PC users and also overseas globally compared to the initial Chinese mobile market. The team has also realized that it really needs to start developing away from that very initial mobile focused UI style of development. So TLI is planning a major UI and UX overhaul, whether that's going to be how menus look like, whether that's going to be controller support. We're hoping to bring the game more in line with traditional Western player expectations for a PC title, because also that's where the majority of overseas players are. Most of our players on the global client are actually playing on PC, not on mobile, like what you might see on the Chinese market. So of course that's something very important to us. We still don't have a specific timeline for when the new interface and the new graphic system and the new control system are going to be implemented, but it's something that's already in the works. And when that gets implemented, the way that it's likely going to be rolled out is that, first we're just going to roll out the new UI, the new control system, the new graphic system. Let that run for a season, see how everything pans out, see if it's been implemented successfully, make further adjustments if needed. And if everything goes smoothly, then we might also start considering future console releases and console ports, because of course we need a mature controller support system if we ever want to port things onto consoles. So yeah, to get back to it, do you think we may ever see a console version? I cannot give a specific confirmation on which console, but yes, it's also something that is within our plans, but we need to first launch the new UI and control system before we can get to that. Oh, my voice is kind of going, I'm sorry guys. Before I totally lose my voice, the game is slowly becoming bloated with more and more seasonal mechanics, which is not friendly to beginners. Games like PoE often have so many mechanics that the players think they need to have a degree to learn the game. How would you address this so a new player still feels welcome even in the event of new seasonal mechanics? Same question with hero traits. Each season a new one is introduced. Do you just plan on adding a new one each season? First of all, let's start with the final question. Do you just plan on adding a new one each season? I'm not sure if he's referring to a seasonal mechanic or to a new hero trait, but in regards to both, yes, it is most likely that we're gonna keep introducing a new one each season, because that has always been a core part of TLI's seasonal development. That is a key part of what makes each new season so exciting, is getting to witness a new hero trait, getting to interact with a new seasonal mechanic, see all the hype, see everything that comes with all those new expectations. So we do hope that we can continue to develop it like that. Now, does that system of development bring bloat to the game? Yes it does, and it's something that we are very aware of. So something that we have discussed internally is the possibility of rotating seasonal mechanics. So rather than having every seasonal mechanic available at every single time, maybe we're gonna work on rotating some of them in and out, and then hopefully the game can be less bloated and more streamlined for everyone. In regards to making the game more friendly to beginners, as we've mentioned several times in this video, we're also working on clearer in-game instructions, a wiki of sorts, which is gonna help players more clearly understand how to interact with each mechanic and what they should be used for, how they should be optimized, and even how they should be paired with the NetherRealm Atlas tree. And of course we have made some advances in that sense. We do feel that the quick build and quick loot functions, and basically porting all of those external builds and external mapping strategies into the game does help a lot with players to guide themselves throughout the game. But of course, it's more of a copy by the numbers kind of thing, which does leave players not understanding the underlying concepts behind each build. And of course, it can also lead to the problem of, when players are copying their homework, they copy something wrong because they actually don't understand why certain things are supposed to be paired the way they are, and they forgot a piece or two during the equation, and then that breaks everything. So yeah, to answer your question, we're also going to be working on making the game more accessible for beginners by making a more complete implementation of how each game mechanic is explained, basically. And yes, game bloat, something that we definitely want to address. Rotating seasonal mechanics, likely. When, not sure. Okay guys, that's it for today. That was a long one, and we actually still have a lot of questions to get to, so We're gonna be covering the rest of the questions that you guys dropped throughout the Q&A forum via our official website. So we're gonna be publishing a series of written Crow's Corner Q&As throughout the upcoming weeks. So also please stay tuned for that. So thank you so much for all the feedback that you guys submitted this time around. As I mentioned before, the reason we took so long to get to it is because, as you saw, some of the questions were actually quite difficult and they led to a lot of internal discussion, and hopefully some of that is actually going to be implemented either right onto this upcoming new season or maybe the one after that. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for all your questions, advice, and criticism, and so much more. That's it for today, and we'll catch you all in the next one.